Alright, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College with the third in a series of videos that I'm creating as an introduction to the AWD1111 .NET framework with web databases class, as you can see, as part of the Rankin Technical College Application and Web Development Program. So far, what I've done is I have gone over an article called MVC for Noobs, which was in tootsplus.com, and then I went over a shorter article that was actually from Microsoft itself. This article right here is on a site called Code Project that I frequent a lot, frequently I guess. I didn't download the sample, but notice it says we will try to look at ASP.NET MVC architecture from a beginner's perspective. That's the good news. The bad news is the article is 5 years old, so it is a little bit dated. And as the author says here, we will look at it from a beginner's perspective. There are a lot of articles available. All right. MVC is an architectural pattern. You've heard all this stuff before, so let's talk about a few things here. Now, in this article, what I'm going to do, and literally this just came to me, is I'm going to show you a couple things. Now, the author of this, his name is Rahul Rajat Singh, and you notice that this doesn't start with a capital. It's no big thing. You know, he's got it's, and it's not an apostrophe, etc. But let's just take a look at this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up, come over to here, move that over. I'm going to start up Visual Studio. I'm working with Visual Studio 2015, the Community Edition. All right, so I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do a File, New, Project. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to Visual C#. All right. And let's see. If we go to Web, we've got Core and a Web application. It's been a while since I've done a regular Windows form, so please bear with me for just a couple minutes while I, for lack of better words, kind of get my bearings here. So let's see. That's a Windows form, but that's just a regular C# project. It's got to be under here. And I think we do go here. So let's go to here and we'll just say Windows form. All right, because that's what we're going to be creating. I'm not going to worry about a GitHub repository for this example. All right, and I'm going to do a web forms right there. Click OK, and you get a very, very simple little interface. It's creating everything right now. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click View and I'm going to go to Toolbox. So I have that there. Good. All right. So it's got this. Let's see. I don't need any of this. And it did come in with a Models folder and a Scripts folder and a Fonts folder and an App Data and an App Start. Let's run this and see what it looks like. So this is literally right out of the box right here. All right, so this is web forms. It looks a lot like an ASP.NET MVC project to me. It's running from a port. And I'm not sure what the difference is right now. But let's right mouse click and choose view page source, and we'll see a couple things. One thing you'll notice, I guess it is a Windows format, because notice they've got view state. And that's basically right there holding all of the values that the program wants, needs, has, etc. All right, so why am I even showing you that? Well, that's considered the old-fangled way of doing things. All right, so as it says, view state is the heart of ASP.NET, okay? When it comes to the ability of ASP.NET to provide stateful abstraction over stateless HTTP protocol. So, in other words, remember that if I make a call, a hypertext transfer protocol or HTTP call request to a server, and I get a response, and then I make another request, by default, since HTTP is stateless, the system does not even know that it's the same machine making two requests. All right, to the server, it's as though two different machines are making the two different requests. The way you get around that is you use view state in here. All right. Code behind, as it says, the author says here, is the best part of ASP.NET. Well, what's code behind? Well, if I stop my run, you'll notice here that I have, for example, there's default.aspx. But there's no C# code in there per se. If I want the C# code, I've got to go into default.aspx.cs. All right. You're going to notice as we go on that this is a little bit different. Oh, I got a lot of stuff open. That this is a little bit different between the way that you do it for MVC and the way that you do it for web forms. So this is the web forms way. It's got a page life cycle, and it does have support for test-driven development. All right. That's considered the old-fangled way of doing things. So notice a look here at MVC. MVC framework embraces the fact that HTTP is stateless, so no stateful abstraction will be provided by the network. It's up to the developer to manage state. So the onus, so to speak, is moved from the software to the developer. Now, speaking for me personally, I like it that way. All right, and I've given an example in class before. I may or may not have ever said it on one of these videos. I don't know, but as an example, you know, in my free time, occasionally I go out and I karaoke. So what does this have to do with anything? Well, when I karaoke, and I'm going to do a song, all right, and let's say that it is more of a ballad, okay? If I have my way, I like a karaoke version that has no background vocals. If I screw up the song, I want me to be the one that screws it up. I don't want it where the vocals, the background vocals, are so bad that they screw it up and people concentrate on that and can't even hear me. In much the same way, when I'm doing this, I like to be in charge of as much as possible. Then if things go wrong, I can't blame the software. It's all on me. So, look familiar? The model, the classes that contain the data. The controller, the classes that are invoked on user request. Notice the main tasks are to generate the model class object, pass them to some view, and tell the view to generate the markup and render it on a user browser. That's pretty simplistic, but that's pretty darn good. The views, the simple pages containing HTML and C# code. All right. So they come here and they say this is the MVC request response process right here. So the user goes into his or her computer, and makes a request in the form of entering some kind of an address in their address bar. Step 2, the URL routing module intercepts the request and starts to parse it. So it looks at it, sees whether or not what has been put in there is valid, etc. Step 3, the appropriate controller and handler is identified from the URL. Step 4, the appropriate action in the identified controller is executed. Step 5, the action will create the model class based on data. Step 6, it will pass on this created model class to some view and tell the view to proceed. Step 7, the view will execute and create the markup based on the logic and the model's data, push them back as HTML to the browsers. So in other words, it is you come in there, make an HTTP request. All right? That eventually makes its way to the controller that does whatever it has to do to communicate with the model class to get the required data. That required data is then returned back to the controller. And after that, the controller passes that on to the view so it can be presented to the user as HTML. All right, here's an example. That should be that, and I'm not going to go through this though. All right, so they go through some routing. You're going to see this. You are going to see that. Boy, I don't like the way that looks. Move this over here. All right. So when we look at this right here, all right, we've got 1, 2, 3 arguments in here. And you're going to see this, believe me, a lot in this class. But this is the name of the controller. All right? So it is, the name of the controller will be blog controller. All right? The action, or when the blog controller runs, the index method is what's going to run. All right? And we can put in an optional URL parameter. Now that may or may not make any sense, but it will as we go on. I'm not going to go through this. We're in MVC 5, so this is old. It's not done exactly like that anymore. Again, much of this has changed, and I did not want to waste my time or your time on this. All right? I might not have too much more to go through on this. You can take a look at this yourselves. If you're so inclined, this might be one that I really don't spend much, if any, time on in class. All right? I did want to mention, though, I'm going to close this, but I did want to mention, sure, I can say that. Almost sounds a little funny, almost, but Microsoft's ASP.NET site is ASP.NET. All right. Now you'll notice that a lot of the stuff here is Visual Studio 2017, but the textbook that we are using for this class, which is right here, ASP.NET MVC with Entity Framework and CSS, all right, that book assumes that you're using 2015. So that's what I'm planning on using. All right. Now there's a lot of stuff that's in here. All right. And what I'm going to do in just a couple minutes is I'm going to go through, I want to show you this very quickly. Last year, a year ago when I taught this class, spell it right, I used a book by Muroc. All right. The book, let me go find it. Let's see. Muroc books, bestsellers. Let's keep going here. That's the book that I use. Murox ASP.NET 4.6 Web Programming with C# 2015. It's a good book, except for the fact that the entire book, other than chapter 25 out of 25, the entire book is on ASP.NET Web Forms. All right? So why am I telling you that? Because I've managed to procure the PowerPoint presentation for chapter 25, which is this chapter right here. So I am going to go through that next. After I go through that, I'm going to go through a couple of iterations where out on docs.microsoft.com, the ASP.NET Getting Started. Now this is a little dated, but I'm going to go through the Getting Started with ASP.NET MVC, and then I'm going to do the Getting Started with EF6 using MVC5, and then I'm going to do the EF database first with ASP.NET MVC. I'm going to go through all those. All right. Then there's the life cycle of an MVC application. You can take a look at that if you're so inclined. All right. Some recommended resources, so some books and articles, etc. that you can read. And some recommended tutorials and articles. All right. But what I'm most concerned with, again, is going through that Muroc and then going through these three things. Okay. So the Muroc stuff is right here. It is 48 slides. I will come back to do that momentarily.